My name is Amber Oliver, and I want to start by asking you, what would the world look like without prisons? Justin is an inmate at Auburn Correctional Facility. He came to the SHU, or the Solitary Confinement Unit, after not following the facility rules. He had a difficult time in this environment, and he reported to me as a mental health worker that he needed alternative placement. He needed to have programming. He needed to get out of his cell more often. He wasn't afforded this because he wasn't determined as seriously mentally ill in the New York State prison system. Due to this, he engaged in repeated acts of self-harm until he could put a finger through his arm because he used a sport to carve it out. And at that point, we finally were able to give him the designation to get him to a program where he could have 4 hours a day out of cell in order to attend programming like this. How is solitary helping Justin? How is confining him to a cell for 23 hours a day helping him learn how to behave better? The problem that we have and the challenge we're facing is how do we change the prison paradigm from incapacitation to rehabilitation? As you can see here, mass incarceration is a result of a prison population that has rapidly increased with no real way to rehabilitate these inmates. You can see here that since the early 70s to 80s, we've had this rapid increase in inmates, and we haven't had a way to really help them. Just like Justin, 80 to 100,000 inmates a year, at any given time, any day of the year, are held in this type of confinement. You can see this comparison of a SHU cell in an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment, where 19 of these could fit. And he spends 23 hours a day in that cell. Next, I'd like to take a look at some of the statistics from New York State and their use of solitary confinement. As you can see here, the racial distribution in New York State, as a population as a whole, it's primarily white. You can see here that the general prison population and the extreme isolation population, or our solitary confinement population, is primarily African American. Here, we're looking at the length of sentences, the amount of time people spend in solitary on average. It's about 5 months, with most of them being from 1 month to 1 year. Here we have the age distribution. As you can see, inmates in their 20s are most likely to be found in solitary confinement in comparison to inmates who are much older or above 50. Here you can see the distribution of SHU cells in New York State. You can see here Southport and Upstate both have the largest numbers. They are supermax facilities. They hold only inmates in this type of isolation. I'd like to draw your attention to Auburn, which holds 83 cells. That's where I want to focus in on our initiative today. So how do we make an impact? This is a very big population. How can we change this? The BCU, or Behavior Correction Unit, is a hybrid type prototype. The goal of the program is to provide incentives to inmates to encourage them to have better behavior and to change their ways of approaching their life, as well as provide them group programming, both educationally, mental health-wise, and criminologically. You can see here that the BCU is made up of 5 phases. These phases include admission, so an inmate is admitted to the program after they have received a disciplinary ticket and have come to SHU. After that, they're in the assessment phase for the first 14 days, where mental health will provide assessments that they may have not already had completed, like a PCLR, which is a psychopathology checklist. This tells us their criminogenic risk factors. Those who score high on this will require higher levels of programming than those who score lower. Next, they'll move into the enrollment engagement phase. They'll move into attending group therapy based on their assessments. So what types of programming do they need? Are they low educationally and they need education programming? Do they have mental health issues? They need to attend mental health programming. This will all be determined here. The next step is progression. So as an inmate is attending this group programming, they are earning incentives. So they may move from a restart chair to not having to be shuffled in for group therapy. They may earn extra programming hours. They may earn extra time in the rec pen. They may earn extra phone calls home. Then they move to termination. So as their SHU time comes to an end, they're assigned an amount of SHU time based on their infractions. They have this ability to share what they've learned with their peers. They also have the ability to give feedback to the program. What's been helpful? What hasn't been helpful? What did you wish you could have? And then we have this follow-up data collection. So at the 6-month mark, we reach out to the inmates again, ask them, how has it been? Since 6 months since you've been here, Has it been helpful? Is there something that is resonating with you? Is there something that's not resonating with you that you wished you had an opportunity to have? We also are going to look at other types of data, which I'll cover in a little bit. Here you can see a mock-up of our group program room. These chairs here are what we call restart chairs. They look like this. They're a type of chair desk unit that the inmate can be restrained into, so they can't move about freely. This provides the heightened level of security that these inmates may potentially need based on their level of threat to the facility. Next, I'd like to talk about some of the initiatives that are happening around the country and around the world to affect change for this population. One of the big things you have here is the Unlock That Box campaign. This campaign is a new initiative, and it has a steering committee that includes Solitary Watch, it includes the Correctional Association of New York, and it includes ACLU's Stop Solitary campaign. Here you see their mission, their goal, and their how. So the big piece I want to look at is their how. So they're going to offer resources, they're going to offer funding, and technical assistance to new and established anti-solitary campaigns across the country. So their way of changing this problem is to help fund these campaigns, help these people work towards making these initiatives work, essentially. Some of the other changes we have are legislative changes. You can see here, 2014 was a big year. A lot of states changed their laws on how they were going to use solitary, the amount of time inmates could stay, who could go, and what kind of sanctions they could have. The last thing I want to draw your attention to is the Senate bill that's currently at the Judiciary Committee. This Senate bill, Solitary Confinement Reform Act, is actually an act to change the way that the Federal Bureau of Prisons uses solitary confinement. So the goal of this act is to really limit that stuff so that inmates will be provided group programming, they'll be provided out-of-cell hours and times like that. It'll limit the length of stay to no more than 90 days. Some of the other things that are happening, some programs I'd like to go over. In Colorado, they've instituted a 15-day maximum. What they found was, bottom line, that they have a vacant supermax and they have one repurposed supermax. So they're seeing a decrease in the need for this type of housing based on these initiatives. Next, you have Washington. They have a 9-month intensive program. They started moving people to lower security levels, and what they found was there was no increase in violence. They also identified inmates that they felt they couldn't reduce their level of security, that they were a high threat. And instead of moving them, they kept them in segregation, but they provided them programming, which they found there was also a huge decrease in violence in those units as a result of this. You also have Alger in Michigan. It's a 6-stage incentive program. All inmates start at level 2, so they have something to earn and something to lose. It really gives them some buy-in to their program. Some of the things that they can earn in their incentives are basketballs in the rec pen. They can earn extra phone calls, longer showers, things like that. In Grendon and Great Britain, this is a therapeutic community. In this community, inmates choose to be a part of it, and they receive only group programming. They do not receive any individual therapy from the staff on board. If they have an issue with someone within a unit, it gets brought to a community meeting, and the community decides how to handle it. So it really gives the inmates some buy-in to their own prison time. And lastly, I want to talk about the New York State SMI initiative. So I talked a little bit about how Justin wanted to go to an alternative program. In New York State, they passed a law that in 2008, anyone who is designated seriously mentally ill could be moved to a special program called the Residential Mental Health Program. These units provide 4 hours a day of group programming Monday to Friday, and it's focused on mental health needs. In order to get this designation, you have to be seriously mentally ill by community standards, so you have to have schizophrenia, major depressive disorder, other diagnosis, or you have to have persistent self-harm acts, where you're not being able to manage your own behaviors in a way that is a threat to yourself, which is where Justin kind of fell under after his repeated issues. So how do we know that the BCU will be effective? So we want to institute this program, we want to base it off the SMI. Instead of only giving mental health patients this alternative programming, we want to give it to all factors based on their criminogenic needs. How do we know it's going to work? So we're going to look at different types of things. We're going to look at short-term goals and long-term goals. In the short term, we want to reduce their rates of return to SHU. So if last time they were in general population for 5 days, we want it to be 10 days the next time, and an increasing amount of time that they're spending in general population without engaging in these negative behaviors. The next thing we want to look at is long-term goals. We're hoping that what they'll learn in this solitary unit and how they're applying it to the general population in prison, they can then apply to their life in the community. And it will reduce their rates of recidivism as well, because they'll be learning these new techniques on how to handle their emotions, or they'll become more educated and have more access to certain things. How are we going to get the data? What type of data are we going to look at? We're going to look at quantitative and qualitative data, both. So we're going to look at inmate feedback, both at discharge, 6 months, and 1 year post discharge from the program. We're also going to look at some of the quantitative data that goes along with their tickets. So what tickets are they receiving? What are the offenses? How often are they receiving them? How many days of sanction are they receiving for these types of things? And this is all stuff that is already currently generated within the New York State prison system. It's already within the system, so it's something easily to track. We're also going to look at recidivism rates. That's tracked by the parole committee. And their mental health progress, which is a little bit of a more qualitative factor, because mental health obviously is going to have some input on that. All the data we're going to collect is going to be compared to Attica Correctional Facility, which is another level 1 facility in the state that's pretty equal to Auburn in its structure. So we're going to get our information from social workers, from inmates, and from security staff. Social workers are going to do that admission testing. They're going to provide that mental health feedback. The inmates are going to provide their client satisfaction, both in the short and the long term. And then the security staff, they're going to provide us this information because they're the ones writing these disciplinary tickets. They're going to have access to that type of programming. The other thing that I want to touch on is that at the correctional facility, the control group there, they're also going to do satisfaction surveys because we want to see what are these inmates hoping that they can get out of solitary. What are they missing? What do they wish that they could have that they don't have access to? So that we can kind of move that into the program and meld the program to what the needs are of the actual clients, the inmates themselves. So how much is this going to cost? What's our budget? So in the first year, you can see our budget is $1 million. In the second year, it's $1.1 million to equate for an increase in staffing. You can see here we have a big facility upgrade in the first year because we have to outfit those group rooms to handle these restart chairs. This is all state funded. It'll have to go under the state budget because the Office of Mental Health and the Department of Corrections are both state funded programs. So it needs to be through those because those are the parties that will be able to administer the program. So where do we go from here? What are the next steps and how can we make this better? So I think I want to start by talking about some of the strengths of the program. I think one of the big strengths is that the inmates won't need to malinger mental illness to get treatment or to get what they feel that they need. So if they want to go to a stress management group, they can go to that. They don't have to be like Justin and put a spork in his arm for so many hours until he has a hole in it so that he'll qualify for that. The other thing is it's modeled after an initiative already in New York State. We're already doing this for the specialty mental health population. So it's going to be easy to enroll everyone in it because it's something we've already kind of looked at. We have some group programming already in the system that we can use to our advantage. What are some of the weaknesses? We talked about it needs to be state funded. In order to get it state funded, it needs to be a part of the budget. We need to have the governor sign off on it. We need to have the administration of the facility, the DOCS commissioner sign off on it, the OMH commissioner sign off on it. It also requires an increase in staffing, which inherently comes along with a variety of issues. You need to be able to hire the right staff, the staff that want to be engaged in this type of paradigm shift. So where am I going? What are the next steps in my journey to get the BCU on the ground and running? This week I have met with a representative from John Kakwa's office. I also met with a representative from Senator Chuck Schumer's office to talk to them about this program. They are constituents, these are their constituents, they're the families of the inmates are their voting constituents. So I think this is really important to them. I also am going to propose the program at the beginning of the year to both the Department of Corrections and to the Office of Mental Health. I'm also going to work towards getting a meeting with the governor and the governor's office to work on proposing this to them. Additionally, we're going to partner with the NYCLU and the Disability Rights of New York. Historically in New York State, any initiatives to change the use of solitary confinement have come through legislation by these two groups themselves. So NYCLU was able to change the sentence structure, and the DRNY was able to change the program for mental health inmates and allow them to have some changes. You can see here a list of my references. Do you have any questions?